All right, let's now shift our attention to the other big story that we are tracking on WION, and this comes back home from India, where the death toll due to acute encephalitis syndrome in India's eastern state of Bihar has now gone up to over 100. At least 88 children are reported to have died in just one district of Muzaffarnagar due to the acute encephalitis syndrome. Now, another 10 children have also died in the district of Vaishali in Bihar, and one death has been reported from Begusarai and 2 from Motihari. The deceased children are mostly in the age groups of 1 till 7 years. Meanwhile, the Union Health Minister Harsh Vardhan has visited a hospital in Muzaffarnagar to take stock of the situation. Now, the World Health Organization defines the AES as an acute onset of fever and change in mental status and or the new onset of seizures among a person of any age at any time of the year that can be caused by bacteria, fungi and even viruses of various different strains. Now, the symptoms include sudden high fever, convulsions, severe vomiting, weakness and unconsciousness, mental confusion, disorientation, delirium or even coma. So is this disease new to India? Well, not exactly. AES is actually an annual phenomenon. All right, let's now shift our attention to Hong Kong, where protesters are holding a mass rally in Hong Kong as public anger refuses to abate following the unprecedented clashes that have taken place between protesters and the police over the extradition bill that had been proposed despite Chief Executive Carrie Lam suspending the bill. Now, succumbing to protests, Lam, a supporter of the bill, admitted that there were certain inadequacies in the legislation, and these, in fact, are live visuals that we are getting from Hong Kong, and you can look at the number of people who at this point of time have gathered to protest against this bill that has now been suspended, but they are now demanding 2 things. One, they want the bill to be completely scrapped. Second, they also want Carrie Lam to step down as the chief executive. Meanwhile, we're also joined in by our correspondent, Patrick Falk, who is joining us for more on this. Now, Patrick, you know, this is almost unprecedented. Yesterday, we heard the chief executive of Hong Kong who said that she's suspending this present bill. But despite that, that has not satisfied many of the protesters. They are demanding that this legislation should, in fact, be scrapped altogether. What exactly are they protesting for today?
Well, I think you just mentioned it. I mean, the key thing is they don't just want this bill to be suspended. They want it scrapped altogether. And you also there that they want Carrie Lam to step down. I was just in the thick of it right behind me just a moment ago, and there are some very strong calls for the chief executive to stand down. Another thing they are also asking is for the government to rescind the use of the word riot to refer to the protest that took place on Wednesday. And they also want the people, the 11 people that they've detained, to be released. There is still an enormous amount of anger over what's happened. Calculated what the mood is in Hong Kong at the moment. And there was a big question about whether or not the Civil Human Rights Front would continue with the strike tomorrow. They're the organisers of this protest today, of course, and they have now announced that they intend to do that. Perhaps they feel the momentum is behind them, and they have categorically stated that they will not stop their protest until Carrie Lam scraps the bill altogether, apologises and steps down.
And also, if you could, Patrick, give us a sense as to why is it there's been so much opposition to this extradition bill that was being proposed by Carrie Lam. What about this bill was not liked by the protesters?
Well, look, there are simply fears that if this bill goes through, that people here could face the Chinese legal system, which doesn't have a good human rights track record, and there are concerns. that they've had this shoved down their throats. I mean, when you've got 1 million people, a reported 1 million people last week turning out to protest the way that they did, and again, with certainly tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, are out on the streets today, then they're not happy that the government isn't listening to them. But this isn't just about the extradition bill itself. This is about so many other things that they feel that they haven't been heard on. The government has failed catastrophically in addressing some very real problems that people in Hong Kong are facing, like the housing crisis and the wealth gap, and they're fed up and tired that the government is focusing more and more on bringing Hong Kong closer together with the mainland and not dealing with real issues that Hong Kong people are facing.
Absolutely. And the other issue that has been spoken about a lot is the erosion of Hong Kong's autonomy. The fact of the matter is, at the time, in 1997, when the British actually ceded Hong Kong back to China, there was a rule that was a sort of a compromise that was struck, that was one state, two systems, and this will lapse in 50 years. That is by the year 2047. So is there not a certain inevitability that by, as the years progress, the whole of Hong Kong will anyway come under the Chinese law? And is this a losing battle that's in fact being fought by the protesters here?
Well, that point has been made many, many times, that there is a deadline to one country, two systems. But people here don't want that deadline to be brought any closer. They want to fight for Hong Kong's unique way of living, and they want to continue with the level of autonomy that was promised to them under the joint declaration between China and the UK. And so that's something that has increasingly faded away, and Beijing made suggestions that was a historical document and no longer necessarily applies today. So people here are really fighting, as I say, for Hong Kong's unique way of living, and they do not want to necessarily be brought into part of China just yet.
Right, I think that's an interesting thing that will be discussed and talked about. And also, just before I let you go, Patrick, Carrie Lam's position at this point of time is an extremely difficult one, because the protesters not just want the law to be scrapped, they are demanding that she also step aside as the chief executive of Hong Kong. Is this likely to happen anytime soon?
Well, she's certainly not showing if she intends to do so. Yesterday, in a press conference, she was unapologetic about what had happened over the week, and said that people in Hong Kong simply didn't understand the bill. That's actually sparked more anger among people here, and a lot of people perceive the chief executive to be arrogant, and that she is someone who has refused repeatedly to listen to people in Hong Kong. Certainly, at this point, it will be very hard for her to govern, given the political crisis that she's found herself in and the lack of credibility she has now. But we also know that the establishment are all gathering around her and showing their support. One major development just in the last 24 hours was that 200 delegates of China's top national advisory and legislative body were meeting in the local liaison office, and they've come out to say that they support her. And that is very important indeed for her, given the weak position that she's in right now.
Absolutely. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Patrick Falk, for joining us from Hong Kong and getting us the latest in terms of this very, very difficult situation that is presently unfolding. And also the protests continue even today. And this is what the scene, in fact, looks like. Remember, there's been a major climb down from Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, where yesterday she announced that she was suspending this proposed legislation, the extradition bill. That's now been put on hold, not indefinitely though. This could be taken up later sometime by the government. But the people in Hong Kong are demanding that the bill should be scrapped completely. They say that the one state, two system compromise that was struck, this should continue and this should not be diluted. And there are other issues as well that the people of Hong Kong are in fact protesting on. And these protests, it appears, are not likely to die down anytime soon.